पसीना मौत का माथे पर आया है, आई ना लाओ, हम जिंदगी की आखिरी तस्वीर देखेंगे. Such were my thoughts and feelings when my oxygen levels have dropped to 61, almost to the fatal level, while climbing an expedition called Kalindi Khal about 3 years ago. Or just before crossing a very ferocious river, somewhere during a Lamkhaga expedition about 7 years ago. And why go that far? Just about 2 months ago, I was trying to climb Kangyatse 1 in Ladakh when my right leg twisted completely, leading to a failed summit attempt, but also leading to a lot of learnings. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to be sharing a lot of mountaineering stories with you, which has led me to live life very sustainably. And I hope there is something for each one of you out there. Let's move on to the first one. Failures and success are only milestones. This is something that I have learned in my mountaineering career of last 15 years. And I have some stories to share with you. This goes back to about 13 years ago when I was trying to climb a peak called Stok Kangri at about 6,125 meters in Ladakh. And as the luck would have it, this was at about 7:30 a.m. in the morning. I was only about 200 meters short of summit. And a very high level of acute mountain sickness hit me and I started hallucinating. In that hallucination, I saw clearly a dhaba and a truck parked next to that dhaba. And I remember this very, very vividly in my head, even today. And I saw some of my fellow climbers were having chai there at that time of the morning. And this was clearly hallucination. This was clearly very high degree of acute mountain sickness. But my mind was not able to make any decisions, not making any senses whatsoever really. With all my energy left at that point, I started almost run up to that point where I saw the bumps of some of the fellow climbers sitting up there and having chai. And when I reached there, I realized I could see only the same set of boulders, the same set of hard, thick ice and some fresh snow out there. There was no dhaba, there was no chai. And at that point, I realized that there is something wrong. As the luck would have it, at the same time, my expedition leader observed me and yelled at me almost in a very abusive way, asking me to go down. I didn't know what he was trying to do, and my mind had stopped working completely. And I took a U-turn and I came down. Fast forward this story, I reached base camp at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon and I was dead for the next several hours. I hated mountaineering. And 2 days from then, I was at the Leh airport waiting for my flight back to Delhi, and that's when a sense of defeat hit in me. And my tears wouldn't stop. I was like, hey, Lalit, you were defeated. You couldn't do the last 200 meters when it actually mattered the most. And I came back and I trained myself very hard for the next 1 year. Very, very hard physically and mentally both. And I was all set to go for my next summit attempt to Stok Kangri, the same peak that I'm going to be climbing now for the second year in a row. And this time I was, much better prepared physically and mentally. So until the base camp, it was like a hunky-dory ride, relatively. But as soon as we hit the base camp, it started snowing very fiercely there. And this was the same time, some of you would remember that J&K was hit by some very bad floods, really. And there was a lot of loss of property and life. And I was standing up there at the base camp. The snow just kept getting fierce. And the second day when we were to go for the summit attempt was called off. And we were asked to march down. And this was my second failed attempt of Stok Kangri. And I was coming down all gloomy, disappointed, feeling very sad about all of this. And that's when we realized that, while it was snowing up there, it's kind of raining badly in this fragile land of Ladakh. And we encountered some landslides and stuff and all that. And immediately we sort of forgot our disappointment and went into the rescue missions, trying to save lives and trying to save some property. We were stuck at Leh airport for about 3 days. There was a low-hanging cloud over Leh. The flight operations were shut down. The airport was shut down. We would go and queue up at the airport every day and see kilometers long, queues. some cancer patients very desperately trying to reach Delhi and connect to the rest of the world, some people who would want to see their ailing relatives, and just a lot of desperation around. And at that point, what hit me was, is the mountaineering a sport which is only an individual sport, which lets you climb peaks and doesn't include anyone else? And the learning was, no, this sport basically includes everyone, and this is all about sustainable living. I came back, and I then trained one more time for 1 full year. And I went back again. And this time, this was my third attempt to climb the same peak. And as the luck would have it, we were greeted by a very bad cloud burst. As soon as I landed in Leh, I was told that there is a cloud burst and that has collapsed and broken many bridges, which posed a big logistics challenge for us. I remember that must have been one of the most physically enduring activity that I did. I actually carried 26 kgs of weight on my front and on my back. And I said, it's okay if the mules can't come up, I'll still go. Everybody who was coming down during those days was telling me, including, by the way, some of the celebrity climbers, that there is no chance, dude, that you could get through to the summit this time. Don't waste your time, go back. But somewhere within me, I wanted to still try. And I had almost told myself, I'm going to give up this sport if I'm not able to do the summit at this time. And I reached the base camp. And as the luck would have it, the weather started to clear. The weather was not in my hands for the first 2 attempts. But this time also the weather was not in my hands, right? And we heard a lot of stories around global warming and some of those things. Just taking a quick detour here, I have seen the impact of global warming right in front of my eyes. I have seen, as soon as I went up from Gomukh Glacier on one of my expeditions, I realized the whole glacier was broken, and we actually took like 3 times more time than we would take to sort of climb that route, and roughed up ourselves far more. And some of these things, what we see on TV and what we are just told in videos like these, is something that I have personally witnessed, and I have been on the victim side of some of those things. Anyways, going back to that story, this time, as soon as we reached the base camp, the weather started to clear up a little slightly. And then as soon as we start to climb up, we could reach to the peak of Stoke Kangri. So what I realized was, those 2 failed attempts that I just talked about were not really the failed attempts. They were my preparatory steps so that I could prepare for those 2 years. And then the third time, I go and climb the summit. Now, how do I relate this to the regular life? Well, in our regular life, we take on projects, we take on assignments, there are sales deliverables, and there is just so much that we do really. But we start to speculate results so much, and we look at that milestone, which we call it as a failure or a success, and we think that this is the ultimate destination that we want to be in. But that's not how life is. There are going to be a lot of failures, and there are going to be a lot of successes as well. How do you take a failure and how do you take a success is totally up to you. And I learned this lesson really hard way, that every failure is just a stepping stone, and every success is also just a stepping stone. If you start to rest on your laurels of your past success, you will just be there where you are. And with that, I actually go to my next one, which in mountaineering, I've had a lot of life lessons. But these 3 lessons that I'm going to be talking about today is something that I sort of boiled down for this session. Influence only on what you can control. And I have a couple of stories here to share with each one of you. If you see the picture which is on the extreme right-hand side, there is a river crossing picture that you see. This was a very ferocious river during a Lamkhaga Pass expedition. For some of you who don't know where the Lamkhaga is, this is somewhere on the Indo-China border. And there is no demarcation between India and China. If you are not careful, you could slip into Chinese territory, which you would not want to. And for miles, you would not see anyone there, except for sometimes you would come across the Indo-Tibet border police corps. And we were to cross this ferocious river, but as soon as we reached the river, we realized that the propensity, ferociousness, and the flow of water was so much, and the quantum of water was so much, that we couldn't have crossed this river without a river crossing equipment. And that's not something that we have had with us. Our expedition leader did not anticipate this. Now, what was the choice we had? The choice we had was to go back, spend another 7-8 days to go down, write off all the efforts and money that you spent here, and simply write off the expedition really. Now, after a lot of deliberation, something that was suggested was that let's form a human chain and let's try and cross this river with a human chain of about 6 people holding each other's hands. Sounds very simple, but not when you're seeing that ferocious river in front of you. Now, what happened was, when I was told about this, the intellect of my mind said, no way, this is way too risky. I'm not going to fall for this, and I will not cross this river without the proper equipment. But as I started thinking, and as I started giving the other extreme thought more energy, I realized, and I started telling myself that, hey, if I can hold the hand really tightly of the other 2 people, right, who are sort of in my direct influence control, in my direct sphere of control really, and I only focus on holding these 2 hands, this gives me 3x of my body weight. And if I just focus on that and I don't focus on the temperature of the water, the flow of the water and all of that, I may still be able to make it. I started giving this thought much more energy, much more resilience from within, and then we opted for it. Cut the long story short, we could cross the river without any fatality. And by the way, we were told that there was one person who was passed away just a day before in the same river, and his body was found some 5 kilometers down the river. But we could cross the river. Now, that's one story on influence, what you can control. The second one that I have is a little funny one. And, most of you would be able to relate to this. This is when we were climbing Cognex 2, and about 5 years ago. And at the base camp, the weather has got really bad. It was raining and snowing in parts. And there was no way that we could have gone for summit attempt. All other climbers, there were about 3-4 of us, were roaming around feeling very anxious about, what may happen tonight. Are we going to go up or not? And they were putting their energy into this stress of speculation of what may happen tonight. And I decided to do something different. I actually went to my expedition leader and I said, Vikram, what do you think is going to happen? And Vikram turned back and said, I have no idea. We'll take a call at about 10:30, 10:45 at night tonight. And I asked him straight, I said, what am I supposed to do? And he turned back and said, you're supposed to go back to your tent, eat, sleep, and repeat. And I did exactly that. I went back to my tent. I had 2 full plates of vegetable pulao, and I slept all day. I woke up at about 4 o'clock. I had another plate, and I slept again. I woke up at 7:30, guys. And what I realized was I had woken up after a very, very long sleep. I was feeling absolutely fresh, roaring like a young tiger to go up. And I was just waiting for the weather to clear. Whereas the other climbers had already sort of consumed their energy in feeling very stressed out and scared and anxious of what may happen. And as the luck would have it, the weather started to clear at about 11:30 the same night. And we started to climb up. And I felt that I have had far more energy put into my expedition and summit attempt as compared to some others really. The point I'm making here is very simple, right? I could just influence what I could control directly. At that point, only thing in my control was to eat and sleep well. And some of the time, some of these basic things is what we don't look at. And these are our energy saviors really. So that's the second story that I've had for you guys. The third one, and I think this is the most important one that I've learned, is how to have fun on the way. If you go deeper into this, I'm not just talking about mountaineering here, but I'm talking about life in general. I mean, I'm sure all of you, including me, feel we are on responsible positions, we have so much to deal with, and we start taking things really, really seriously. And that's probably the right way to look at it. However, what I learned was, expecting or looking at any situation in your life, however, it's your choice to make sure that you don't take yourself very seriously. You can take the situation very seriously. You can take your work very seriously. You can take the summit attempt or the expedition very seriously, but not take yourself very seriously. The picture that you see in the middle is one of the Babajis standing next to me, and this was when we had descended down several days after climbing Dev Tibba. And this Babaji who came to me and said, I have nothing to do with this word, but I want your shades. And I asked him, I said, okay, all right, I'll give you my shades permanently. However, you will have to, take a picture with me. And he agreed. He gladly agreed. And this became one of the most funny memories of Dev Tibba expedition. The other one that I want to share with you very quickly is This was during the climb of Deotiba again, and the videos that you saw was one of the ferocious 700 meters wall that we climbed. And the other video that you saw was basically where we had camped our advanced base camp amidst the huge crevasses and stuff. But the same video that you saw was our advanced base camp, and just before the summit, at about 12 o'clock past midnight, there was a very bad snowstorm, and the same place was hit by an avalanche just 2 days ago. And I'll be honest with you, I was very stressed out, and this is about 6-7 years ago that I'm talking about now. From each expedition since then, I think I have grown up a lot, and now I handle situations very differently. Going back to the story, at about 12 o'clock past midnight, there's a very fierce snowfall going on there. There are heavy winds. And just on our backside, there's another 700 meters high vertical wall, almost vertical to about 85 degrees that we need to climb. Just one look at that wall can freeze anyone really. And I was very, very anxious at that point. But what I noticed was something very differently. I noticed that our crew members who were supposed to have helped us at every step, some of them were pumping kerosene in the small stove to make some hot water for us. And while they were doing it, they were all having fun. They were all giggling and laughing, and some of them was, singing a very popular Bollywood number in a very rhythmic tone. And I felt, when I observed them, I felt, look at these guys. They get nothing in return of what they're doing for us. And here I am, supposed to be intellectually better than them, and I'm so anxious about what may happen. And immediately a thought changed my mind, and I said, okay, I'll also start taking things exactly how they are taking. And I started smiling from within, and from then the whole journey became better. The point I'm making is, in your life, you'll come across many weird situations, many hard situations, and it's up to you how you want to take it really. And I'm sure a lot of people sitting out there who are in responsible positions can connect with this thought. This could be a big project that you're taking. This could be a big assignment, a big delivery, or any point or any event in your life. So that's something that I learned. And as I said earlier, summits are only the milestones, but it's the summit which basically, at times, if we are ignorant and if we are not conscious and in awareness, can make us feel very high about us. And what I have realized is in my 15 years of mountaineering career, it's not the summits that I've successfully captured has left me where I am. It was those failed attempts. It was those valleys of my expeditions where I became better, where I became a better human being to begin with, and later as a better professional. As I end this discussion, I just want to thank each one of you, and I hope each one of you looked at the fact that there are peaks that may offer breathtaking views. Life looks really nice when we are at the top of the world. But it's often the valleys that there we discover our true strength, our resilience, and we get our best learnings. And I hope this discussion or this conversation was good enough for each one of you to look at what your peaks and valleys are in your life and how do you start living sustainably. Thank you.